Repeat the question. And the answer. No, I got it.
Welcome to Shred Show, where today we balance the calm collectedness of Rob Machado alongside my on-camera habit of becoming 3 human cans of Red Bull. And whether it works or not is your choice. You may look at this outline on the almond butter and initially consider this board for maybe 3 to 5 foot waves. But what if you had one in your board bag and you could surf any left in the world about as easily as you could surf that beach break by your house?
I got to ride one at Chopu, big enough to stand in tubes, 8 feet on the face. It's always funny because you go out on a board like that on a day like that, and it's like your turn, you're kind of sitting out the back, you've been waiting a while, and then the biggest of the day comes in, and you're on like the wrong board.
So you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, this is the board between my legs.
Yeah. And
you're seeing the wave come, and you're thinking like, I don't know if this is gonna hold in the face, and like, what goes through your head in a moment like that?
At that point, you're like, I have to go. I'm either gonna like slide out, cartwheel. I mean, that thing's got a pretty wide tail. Well, I think the key on that wave, I think, was like getting off to a good start. And like I was in my positioning was really good, and that board obviously paddles really good. So I cruised into it super early. Wasn't like this super late fall out of the sky, like trying to recover and set, you know, like really critical. I like got this really easy glide into it, and like got down and kind of got down to the bottom really easy, and then I could come off the bottom and set up and set my line, and that kind of sets up the whole wave. So I was kind of really confident at that point.
Just once I left the train noise in there to get the ambiance right. Now look at this tree right here behind Rob. Before he and I hit record for this conversation, he shared with me that that is a Paulownia tree, and he was excited to use that wood when the tree grows up to shape an Alaia like you see here for his young son. That's a few years down the road because that tree's got a lot of growing to do, but right now, in the present, both of his new boards with firewire, the almond butter and the creeper, are only made in TimberTech, which is partially comprised of Paulownia wood. So I asked Rob, what do you like so much about TimberTech and Paulownia?
I love Paulownia. I love riding Alaias. I've shaped a lot of Alaias and Pipos and hand planes, and it's just great wood. It's fun to work with. It's easy to work with, and we wanted to come out with those first 2 models in TimberTech exclusively, just based on the fact the environmental side of things, you know, Paulownia being the most renewable source. I just felt like that's kind of inevitably one of the main reasons I ended up going with Firewire was because of that, because of their, you know, environmental side to the way that they construct their boards.
So, this environment thing. This picture was taken in 1898, and it shows a surfer holding what surfboards used to be, a piece of wood, nothing that complex, the same type of thing that Rob wants to make for his son out of this tree. You see, if you were this guy back in 1898, cutting that wood to make a surfboard was not risky for your health, and then when you were done with it, you could just toss it back into the ocean or throw it into the forest. It didn't matter because it was just wood, and Earth loves wood because wood eventually rots and recycles nutrients back into the earth. However, today, most people who make modern surfboards wear a mask to prevent breathing toxic fumes because most of today's surfboards are built from foam and resin and other stuff that doesn't exactly nourish the planet when we're all done surfing it. Now this board is not as perfect as this board in an I love the planet sense, but the wood around the foam adds enough strength to the board to get away with using less resin than normal, and the resin that is used in this board is partially made from biomaterials, so it's less toxic. This means that TimberTech boards meet enough requirements to be EcoBoard Project certified by Sustainable Surf, a project with the goal of making today's surfboards perform like today's surfboards, but having health and environmental impacts more similar to yesterday's surfboards. So what do they feel like to surf?
I definitely think TimberTech has a little less flex, so they're a little bit stiffer. I enjoy riding a stiffer board on my shorter, thicker. I just don't think it has as much of an effect. Like if you took a high performance thruster and you made one in TimberTech and you made one in PU, I think you would notice the difference way more because you're dealing way less volume. You're probably a longer board. There's just more room for the board to flex. Whereas you take a really nuggety, short, thick board, it's like even a PU isn't gonna flex that much.
Now for those of you who go surfing and don't notice the way that different surfboard constructions flex while you're surfing them, another reason that you might like TimberTech in your shorter, wider, thicker boards is that those dimensions usually represent shapes that we surf in smaller waves. The thing about small waves is that they sometimes force you to jump up and down on the board to get through flat sections, and this construction is more robust against dinting and caving beneath your feet than many other board constructions. Of course, that durability is what inhibits bending and flexing as much as, for example, Firewire's LFT boards. But interestingly, TimberTech might make sense on the small wave side of the spectrum and the far opposite side of the spectrum as well.
They made some of Paizel's paddle axe out of TimberTech, I think, for Timmy Reyes.
I'll look those up.
Like an 8.6, 9.6, and a 10.6, and they looked super cool. And I could see where that would be super cool as well, because you know, getting into boards that big, like I don't think flex is really that much of an issue. You're riding a board that's, you know, 3-4 inches thick probably. Those guys, I don't know what their dims are. I don't ride boards like that, so
neither do I.
It seems to me like it would make sense because wood is kind of dampening, you know, and I think they, you know, you look back to what Laird was riding in the early toe days. Brewer was making him wood toe boards just because wood was a little like kind of dampened when you had high speeds and you were hitting chops and stuff. It would kind of absorb it better.
Dimensions on this board are 5'10" by 20 by 2 and 5'8" with 35.3 liters of volume. And when I measured this board earlier at the 12-inch mark at the tail, I came in at about 15.375 inches wide at the 12-inch mark. When I measured the tail rocker curve of this board, I came in at roughly 1.5 inches, which is a very low amount of overall curve happening out towards the tail. And the crazy thing is that when you look at it, you see that a lot of that overall rocker curve measurement is happening about in the last 3.5 inches of the board, curving up from behind the thruster fin. This is a difficult thing to illustrate on camera, but if you use a ruler and look up close, you can actually see how the tail rocker curve continues to increase behind the thruster fin, whereas a lot of surfboards you might compare this to would be much more flat in the tail rocker coming off of the trailing edge of that thruster fin. Now, you do not need to walk into a surf shop with a ruler or a metal bar or anything like that to measure tail rocker curve. You can just feel this very simply when you run your hand on it like this. In my opinion, this element of the board's design is the most exciting thing to look at because for me, it's a big tell that this shape was designed by a professional surfer and not by a surfboard designer who makes boards for professional surfers. For a very experienced surfer who can very intuitively feel how a board reacts when they shift their weight in subtle ways, the low rocker curve measurement here is something they can use to gain speed and generate speed. And then very subtle shifts in their weight can allow them to use this increased curve to fit into tighter angles on the wave than you might expect a shape like this to fit in. The next thing to look at on this board is this kind of crescent moon shaped area that is removed from the deck of the tail.
You're thinning out the tail block to like a really thin, like 1/4 of an inch. So now at the very tip of the tail, I guess when you step on the tail, it's not going to have as much resistance because you have less foam there. You've carved out this, you know, I'm sure if you put that back in, there's more buoyancy there. It's not going to sink as easily. So now you're enabling the tail to sink when you push back and put pressure on the tail.
Now this is where everything really starts to come together because at first glance you could look at this outline and think to yourself, okay, this is one of those hybrid surfboards that shrinks down a standard shortboard by incorporating design elements of a fish. But at second glance you could notice how these two design elements interact with each other and maybe guess that this board would feel more sensitive and responsive to the ways you want to fit it in tight turns when compared with other hybrids that you've surfed in the past.
See, the problem I always had with hybrids was like they would like be right out of the gates, tons of speed, and you just, and then all of a sudden there's a great spot to turn, like a really good section, and you can't turn, and you're just like, oh, I wish I could turn right here. Like everything else was great, but I missed something, you know? So it's like finding that combination of things where you can still have that acceleration and that burst of speed, but when you get to a good spot on the wave, you can still utilize the board and utilize the speed that you have. The almond butter was something that I'd been kind of searching for a long time, you know? It's like I went from being like a high performance world tour guy to like going flip total opposite, where like for a year I didn't even ride a thruster, and I rode single fins and fishes and anything else I could get my hands on. So then I saw this like giant gap, and I thought there was some way to merge these two worlds of like these really high volume, low rocker boards with these like super potato chipped out thrusters. I'm like, there's a happy medium in there somewhere, you know, and I started searching for it. And there was a lot of boards that happened in between there. Like the Biscuit was like probably the first one, which was like a hybrid of the single fin that we put 3 fins on. And then it was like, that's still really low rocker and tons of volume. It's like, okay. And so realistically for me, it was kind of the next, there was a motorboat in there, but the next step was kind of the almond butter.
Now to begin wrapping up, I think that this shape hides volume very creatively, and it might finally be an opportunity to hit that ever elusive 3 to 5 inches shorter than your height, while still hitting your ideal volume without having to go longer than what the surfboard designer recommends. Consider that a big shout out to everyone out there who weighs a little bit more than what their height would suggest. Another thing you can feel very, very easily just how much double concave is placed really throughout the entire board, starting from about here going back. That's very uncommon because double concaves will usually start further back in the board, say between here and here. And we know what having a double concave more forward does. It allows the board to suit a more flowy, finessey style of surfing, whereas a single concave carried beneath your front foot, generally better for getting on rail and grinding and gouging and hacking through turns. To make sense of why someone like Rob Machado might design so much double concave into a board like this, consider that watching him surf is kind of like listening to music. It's flow, it's finesse, it's graceful, it's easy on your eyes. It's basically the complete opposite of watching someone like Poncho Sullivan or Taylor Knox or Sonny Garcia, whose style of power surfing might be more suited to single concaves. For most surfers, I think that the almond butter is probably best suited to 3 to 5, maybe 6 foot waves. And you'd also probably find it accessible if you're in that intermediate stage of skill all the way up to advanced ripping. We'll see you soon on Shred Show. Now here's what you might call a bonus section of this episode. During the time I spent with Rob, I asked him how he consistently stays so present in the moment and how he avoids distractions that might make other people tense or feel anxiety, because one thing that all of us know about Rob Machado is he has this wide-reaching reputation for being mellow and chill and happy. He smiles a lot, seems like he's in a good mood, and I'm telling you, even when someone is a pro surfer and gets to travel the world for free, life isn't just easy. I mean, everyone goes through challenges and struggles, and I wanted to know how Rob stayed so consistently in the present and how he enjoyed himself so much. He said 2 things that really stand out to me. Here's the first.
Over the past couple years, I've been spending some time with Gerry Lopez, and he's been super influential in my entire life, but really in the past couple years has he like really made me aware of being conscious in the present. And you can't change what happened before, you can't change what's gonna happen. Really, you can only participate in what's going on right now.
Now, a few days after the conversation that you just saw, Rob got on a plane and went to, well, I'm not going to say where he went, but he went somewhere on Earth and he spent time with Gerry Lopez. Not all of us have that luxury, but Gerry Lopez's whole vibe and outlook and style of living is very accessible in his book, which I've read and really enjoyed, and I'll put a link to it down below. Click it or Google it for all I care. All that matters is that you just check out the book and maybe read a story, see if it's something that you're into. The next thing is that Rob said some things that I totally agree with.
Turn off your phone. Like to put your phone down and just walk away for 30 minutes is challenging for a lot of people. You know, it's a lot of people are very connected. I'm guilty of it, I mean, we all are to some extent. So I really enjoy going on trips. I just did a trip. I just did 2 trips where my phone didn't work. It's amazing. Like, it's amazing to be in a place where you have this weird feeling like, oh, I need to look at my phone. And then when you look at it and it doesn't work, you're like, oh well. It just eliminates it kind of from your conscious.
Now, if you have work or school or friends or family that make it impossible to turn off your phone, just pick one thing on your phone that you suspect might be distracting you from the moment or distracting you from otherwise being happy without feeling the constant urge to check your cell phone notifications. For me, it's as simple as picking, for example, Instagram and deciding I'm not going to open that application for a week. And even after 2 days of avoiding that one application that usually distracts me and calls my attention away from, for example, reading or just how good the sky or the mountains or the ocean looks, I notice positive benefits of not checking that application after, like, it's noticeable within 2 days. So give that a try, tell me what you think in the YouTube comments down below, and we'll see you soon on Shred Show.